President Biden will deliver his first State of the Union address Tuesday night as the U.S. deals with a number of crises.
A number indeed. The president has also been plagued by some low poll numbers. Average approval rating as of now hovers around 40%. And Democrats, the whole party, in fact, faces pressure to perform with the midterm elections coming up. And the pandemic is entering its third year. Supply chains have not fully recovered. Inflation is up 40-year high. Supply is down. Some experts are questioning when this will be rectified.
The president will also discuss, of course, the war in Ukraine. One of the fallouts from the invasion is the rising price of oil and natural gas. The president is expected to discuss how it will affect the wallets of Americans. Joining us now on all of these topics and more is U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Secretary Buttigieg, welcome. Great to have you with us. Let's start with the president's upcoming speech. How do you expect him to address the growing number of issues this country is confronted with?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity for the president to speak directly with the American people, partly to review what has been achieved and accomplished in the last year, even in the face of everything that America and the American economy have been up against. You look at what it means to have set records for job creation. And that didn't just happen on its own. That's a result of the president's leadership. And this will be an opportunity, I think, to note that congressional action was helpful here, too. Of course, the president has a number of items that he is asking Congress to act on going forward. Things that will make our economy stronger for the long run, things that will be helpful in the face of rising prices, whether we're talking about gas or other sources of inflation. President's put forward legislation that the American people already strongly agree with to lower the cost of insulin, to lower the cost of housing, to lower the cost of childcare, to lower the cost of electric vehicles, something we care about a lot here in the Department of Transportation, of course. And I think recent developments in the news have only heightened the importance of addressing these kitchen table issues that the president insists need action, sending something to his desk so that he can sign it and continue to support Americans going through daily life in the face of all of these crosswinds, whether it's from COVID, inflation, or even from international events.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned gas prices. Let's stick there for a second. You are the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. This is in your wheelhouse. Prices are up $1 in the last year, 25%, 25 cents in the last month. And one of the ideas that has been brought up to fix the situation is to, and this is granted, being pushed by the American Petroleum Institute, is to drill more, open up more U.S. land to drilling. What's the administration's response to that idea?
Well, look, the president has laid out and taken a number of steps, including addressing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, including diplomatic efforts to increase global oil production and other ideas that have been raised that are on the table because everything deserves to be considered. But let's also be clear that we are in the middle of a long-term transformation that is already fast underway, especially when it comes to vehicles. Making electric vehicles more affordable for Americans, something that the president has proposed and is hoping Congress will pass. For example, under the president's proposal, those pickup trucks that start at about $40,000 would have their prices actually down to the high 20s with the tax incentives we're proposing. It would allow more Americans to capture the fuel savings that you get. We don't know from year to year what will happen in the ups and downs of the global oil markets, but we do know that you are better off financially and less subject to maintenance and repair issues if you own one of these vehicles. We want them to be American-made electric vehicles, creating American jobs on American soil. That's going to continue to be a policy priority for this department and administration, even as we're acting to provide more short-term relief.
And Secretary, these gas hikes that we're experiencing are only expected to worsen with Russia's continued invasion into Ukraine. We know, of course, this is a global economy. So when we impose sanctions, some of them hurt the U.S. as well. The president warned Americans about this. But of course, there is a lot of outrage over the Russian invasion in Ukraine. So with all that is going on, should the president consider imposing direct sanctions on Russia's oil and gas industry?
Well, again, I think, so many options will continue to need to be reviewed. As you've seen, there has been swift and decisive action in terms of making sure that Putin faces the economic consequences of not just the United States, but really the world responding to this unprovoked premeditated, unjustified attack on Ukraine. I think you're going to continue to see measures that will be imposed based on what happens on the ground and based on the actions that take place. But what we know is that there is unity among the United States, among our partners, and really among so many different players around the world who don't agree with each other on everything, but agree that this premeditated and unjustified attack is wrongful and must end.
Secretary Buttigieg, bringing it back to this country, we're in a strange kind of economy here because the economy is growing. Lots and lots of jobs are being created. However, when you look at the hardship surveys that the Census Department's been doing for 18 months now, the number of Americans saying that they're having difficulty paying their usual bills, that's been ticking up for about 6 months now. It's now above 70 million Americans. What is the president likely to propose or say to that constituency? It's about 1 in 3 Americans struggling to pay their bills. How is he going to fix that?
Well, I know the president will speak to these issues tomorrow, and I don't want to get ahead of any news that he would make. But what I will point out is that throughout, this president and this administration have been very focused on easing costs for Americans, and there's been a lot of direct support for Americans. Remember, the president's American Rescue Plan put checks in pockets, expanded the child tax credit, gave direct aid to so many Americans who were hurting because of the consequences of the pandemic. Now, we need to make sure that we're acting on costs. That's why the president's Build Back Better effort and initiative and legislation calls for things that are going to, again, lower the price of insulin, lower the cost of housing, lower the cost of childcare, something that so many Americans are facing. We have got to continue to act to support the middle class of this country. The president always talks about building our economy, not from the top down, but from the bottom up and from the middle out. That is what has always worked best for Americans, and I think you can expect that to be a very consistent theme and focus for the president's remarks tomorrow, just as they've been throughout his career and throughout his presidency.
Well, Secretary Buttigieg, to your point of the president wanting to lift up the middle class, there is, of course, a lot happening in the world, but it seems like the president's social and climate spending bill has vanished. Is that legislation dead? And will the president mention it in his address?
Well, we stand by the policies that the president has put forward. I mean, first of all, let's acknowledge that just in the course of the last year, the American Rescue Plan in the spring and the bipartisan infrastructure law that my department is working so hard to implement, a generational investment the likes of which we haven't seen since the Eisenhower years, either one of those things, even on its own, would be a presidency-defining achievement in any other time. But in these times, and in this presidency, this administration, we're not going to stop there. So the president's going to continue to advance these common-sense policies that the American people believe in, and exactly what legislative shape they will take, what the package is going to look like, what the timing is going to look like, or even the sort of brand name that's given to it. I can't speak to that. What I can say is that these are good policies, and we're going to continue to fight for them.
Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Great being with you. Thank you.